We have the ramping up of facial recognition. We've got 30 arrests a day for social media posts. We're getting rid of trial by jury in most cases. And we've also got children being radicalised in our schools by left-wing teachers. And now this government are trying to force digital ID onto us all. And the excuse that they're using, Sir Edward, is that it will stop illegal migrants from working. Now, if the Prime Minister was really serious about stopping illegal migrants from working, then he would detain and deport every single illegal migrant that crosses the English Channel. But of course he won't. This is a gimmick. It's a pathetic attempt by a weak Prime Minister who has lost total control. Over 5,000 of my constituents signed this petition, and they do not want this government poking their noses into their private lives. My constituents are not illegal migrants. They did not break into this country. They are decent, hard-working people whose fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers fought in 2 world wars to secure our freedoms. And every single working person in Ashfield is now going to be penalised because of the failures of this government. You don't need a digital ID to work in this country. You need a national insurance number backed up with a driving licence, a passport or some photo ID. And my message to the government, Sir Edward, is quite clear. You allow undocumented men into our country with no ID at all. You pick them up and place them in luxury hotels with no ID at all. You then give them a free asylum claim and free legal aid with no ID at all. Yet you are ordering my constituents in Ashfield to get digital ID, and then you have the cheek to call us fascists. That's what they do. So just leave my constituents alone and concentrate on clearing up the mess that you lot created.
Chairmanship, I can't tell you how uncomfortable I feel sitting this side of the chamber. But it is testament to the fact that this is an extremely passionate subject which does arguably need to be heard in the chamber. Digital ID is the biggest step towards the surveillance state this country has ever faced in my lifetime. If any government wants access to every detail of your life, they are the ones who should be feared. We live in a country where the state can't even run a basic IT system without losing data or leaking personal details. It won't last a week before a mountain of sensitive personal data is left at a bus stop in Kent again. I do not trust any government. I certainly do not trust this government. And let us remember, once government gets a new power, it never gives it back. It expands and evolves. Digital ID will not stop at proving who you are. It will creep into travel, banking, housing, benefits, even voting. Today it's voluntary. Tomorrow it will be required for security reasons. The day after that, you won't be able to access basic services without it, all for your own good, remember. Britain is supposed to be a country where the government serves the people, not the other way around. A country built on privacy, liberty and trust. British people just want the government to leave them alone and get out of their lives, to build a business, raise a family and live in peace. Digital ID treats every citizen as a suspect. It assumes that the state has the right to look over your shoulder. You defend it by severely limiting the power of the state, not radically expanding it. Abolishing jury trials, cancelling elections, implementing facial recognition, and now this. This incoming dystopian future must be resisted. I will be holding my own protest against this creeping move towards George Orwell's Animal Farm. I will simply not comply. I will not be downloading a digital ID. I urge other MPs to commit to do the same. The solution is obvious. I'll just have to reinvest in a Nokia. I preferred the simplicity of it anyway. The sound people of Great Yarmouth do not want digital ID. Thank you.
The scale of the response to this petition of almost £3 million, or of almost 3 million people, should cause us all to pause, because it's quite clear that this rash proposal has touched a deep-seated opposition amongst our constituents as to anyone deeming to interfere with their personal data and their personal details. And 5,000 almost of my constituents in North Antrim are amongst that number, and I well understand and support their opposition. Now, yes, it might be convenient. It might be expedient for some to have all their data at one location that they can share. But the key issue here is that the government is choosing, without a mandate, to make that mandatory. It would be a different matter if the government was coming to this House and saying, we're going to provide a facility whereby, if you wish, you can have the convenience of that. Yep. If you want to take the risk of being hacked, we will provide the data. But when they say to the citizen, you must, we will impose, then they've crossed a line that no self-respecting government should cross, and that no self-respecting people should tolerate. And that, for me, is the critical component here, that this is a government that thinks that it knows better, that it will impose, and we will be left with no choice as citizens. That is so illiberal, so fundamentally an assault upon our personal freedoms, that I think no one in this House should be entertaining it, least of all the government. Yes, good morning.
The honourable gentleman is making an excellent contribution, as always. Does he agree with me, though, that if this was such an important issue, why was it not in the manifesto at last general election for the governing party?
Obviously, it's a question I can't answer. It's one I doubt if the Minister will answer, but it's a question well posed. Why, oh why, if you're going to impinge upon the personal liberties of your citizens, would you not, in asking for their votes, tell them that that's your agenda? Yes?
I thank the honourable member for giving way. Of course, as chair of the Petitions Committee, I must be fair-minded and impartial at all times. But the member might be acquainted with the fact that I represent the most remote mainland constituency in the whole of the UK. And just let me put this point, we do know what digital exclusion is.
Yep. And representing a constituency in North Antrim, I know many parts of my constituency where you can't get the digital connections that are supposedly promised, and I know what digital exclusion is in that regard as well. So this is a proposition so flawed, no matter which way you look at it, but most fundamentally flawed in the compulsion that it brings. The final point I wanted to make to the Minister is this. Whatever happens on this subject matter, and I trust it is ditched in its entirety, but whatever the ultimate outcome is, it has to be a nationwide outcome. Because too often I've seen in my part of the United Kingdom differences of treatment which add to the already obnoxious situation where we're partitioned by an Irish Sea border. We don't want partitioned on a digital border as well.
Order, order. Robbie Moore to move the motion.
Thank you, Sir Edward, and it is a pleasure to introduce today's e-petition debate under your chairmanship. I beg to move that this House has considered e-petition 730194 relating to the introduction of mandatory digital ID cards. It is a pleasure to open the debate today on behalf of the Petitions Committee, and can I thank all organisations and individuals that I have met with in preparation for the debate. Sir Edward, nearly 3 million people have signed today's petition. It is the fourth most signed petition in the history of parliamentary e-petitions, comparable only to the recent petitions calling for a general election. It is obvious why the plans to bring in digital ID have provoked such an outrage. They are fundamentally un-British and strike at the core political traditions in this country. There are colleagues from all parties opposed to these measures: the Conservatives, the Greens, Reform, Lib Dems, Labour backbenchers, the SNP, Plaid Cymru, independent MPs and colleagues from Northern Ireland. In fact, even several ministers in this government have in the past voiced their opposition to compulsory identity documents, and I will give way.
Thank you, for the avoidance of doubt, I'm only on this side of the House, because it's the Westminster Hall so packed, it's the only remaining chair. I have not defected to the Labour Party, and never will. Or to anyone else. Very quickly, can he confirm this was not in Labour's general election manifesto, so they have absolutely no electoral mandate to extend the surveillance state over the people of this country with this gimmick?
Sir Edward, I could not agree with my right honourable friend enough. So that begs the question, who actually is in favour of these proposals other than the Prime Minister himself? Despite the consistent opposition to identity documents, this is not the first time that they have been forced on the British public. The first ID card in this country came during the Second World War, with cards that could be demanded from the public by a police officer subject to 6 months' imprisonment if not shown. Despite promises at the time, in 1939, the ID cards would be a temporary wartime measure. They were still used throughout post-war Attlee government and only ended, Sir Edward, by the Conservatives in 1952. 50 years later, no longer fighting German spies but the war on terror, the Blair government tried and succeeded in bringing in ID cards back. Only once again, it took the Conservative government, this time in coalition with the Lib Dems, to stop them. Sadly, the Conservatives are unfortunately not wholly innocent when it comes to ID either. In 2021, the government introduced the first digital ID in the form of COVID passports, something that I proudly voted against. Thankfully, these documents only lasted a short while before restrictions were lifted. Which finally brings us on to the modern day and the latest excuse for ID cards, tackling illegal immigration and delivering on government services. And I will give way to the...
Order. Can I just say that you may have noticed there's a huge number of people trying to speak, and I'm going to have to impose a 3-minute limit, and we'll try and get everybody in. But, of course, the more interventions there are, some people will simply not get in. So perhaps you can all bear that in mind, please. Thank you. OK. Carry on.
Thank you, Sir Edward. I will keep my intervention very, very short because there were 4,400 of my constituents signed this petition, which is really quite unheard of for that number. And I think they are very, very clear. They do not want the imposition, because that's what this will be, of digital ID. And as we've heard from the history lesson, you know, time and time again, it's the Conservatives that have come and said, no, we do not want this. The British people do not want it. Isn't it time that this government actually sat up and listened to the public for a change?
And, Sir Edward, that is exactly why this Conservative Party is saying no to digital ID once again. And the latest guesstimate of how much this is going to cost us all, a whopping £1.8 billion. I will give way.
As the member so powerfully articulated, I know my constituents will agree with him that there is much, much better things that we could be doing with £1.8 billion than wasting on a project like this.
And I entirely agree, Sir Edward. But here we are with the latest government's excuse to introduce mandatory digital ID. You can just see communication advisors in number 10, looking at today's polling, dusting off the old ID card plan and slapping "Stop the Boats" on the cover. Indeed, there is no doubt in my mind that had the number one issue of today been tackling potholes, the very same press release would have come out of number 10, claiming digital ID was now the essential reason for tackling the national problem of potholes. So I say this in jest, but just to point out that it seems that any excuse will do, however unjustified and unevidenced, just to push policy through. And I will give way to the Chair of the Select Committee.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Honourable Member greatly for giving way. And I want to say that there are many who do seek the ability to identify themselves, who do not have that as it stands. And I think we all have constituents who are experiencing that. My committee has seen evidence, though, that the figure that has been quoted by the Honourable Gentleman is not recognised by the Secretary of State So it's not recognised by the Secretary of State. It's been put forward by the OBR, and she will be writing to us to set out what costs she sees and when they will be realised. It's also very important to recognise that the level of digital hygiene across government is not such as could support, in my view, a digital ID scheme which is mandatory.
And Sir Edward, there lies all of the explanations and the reasoning as to why there is so many in this House that are opposed to the plans that are being brought forward by the Prime Minister. But here's the question they hope that nobody will ask. If the real target is people who are here illegally, then why on earth do 67 million British citizens who already have national insurance numbers, passports, driving licences and birth certificates need to be dragged into a brand new compulsory database as well? What exactly is it about stopping the crisis of inflatable dinghies in the Channel that requires your son, your daughter, your dad, your 90-year-old grandma to hand over her data to, and facial geometry to the Home Office server? And I will give way.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. My constituents in Epping Forest are deeply concerned about the prospect of digital ID cards. Many have written and spoken to me, and over 5,600 have signed the petition. Rather than improving the delivery of public services, this scheme actually risks wasting billions on a complex, intrusive and potentially very insecure system that will not help anyone. Does my honourable friend agree with me that the Labour government must listen now, take on board the public concerns and scrap this flawed policy?
And my honourable friend makes an absolute point, because the reason is this is not about stopping the boats at all. This is about more government state control. I will give way, and then I'm going to make some progress.
Order. The mover must make progress, all right?
I will be very brief. Will the honourable member agree with me, coming from one of the constituencies in rural Wiltshire, where a huge number of residents have been part of this petition, that digital exclusion is a reality in areas like mine?
I absolutely agree, sir. Is a reality for all. So I ask everyone in this place and those that are watching at home, no matter your political persuasion, imagine your worst ever government. No, one that keeps you awake at night, one that you would march in the streets for. To many, I am sure it will be this government, but to some it may have been previous. This single piece of digital infrastructure hands them, whoever they may be, the key to your life. And once that digital infrastructure is set up, we cannot go back. Once digital ID comes into force, no political party can promise its intentions will stay good forever. Put simply, an ID card gives the state permanent control, and I say no. Now, the slippery slope argument is one so common in debates around civil liberties. It's almost a cliche. But once we have the digital identity infrastructure in place, it will become so much harder for a well-meaning minister to resist the idea that they can fix areas of public policy by tracking and controlling an ever finer level of how a population behaves. And I will give way.
I'm grateful to my old friend for giving way. We have a government that couldn't even keep their own budgets under wraps. What hope have they got with our personal data?
And Sir Edward, that is exactly what a constituent of mine emailed me about, and they were a constituent that voted Labour in 2024 and have said to me, if they can't even control the leakage from the government, how on earth can they control our data? And I will give way, and that will be the final intervention for the time being.
Extremely grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way. I, like many, have been absolutely inundated by Hartlepool constituents who are hugely concerned about this. Does he agree with me that part of the problem here is that we got an announcement without the detail? I've written to the Minister with a number of questions put to me by our constituents. Do you think government ministers owe our constituents answers on the details of what they're actually proposing?
I couldn't agree with the honourable member enough, and I suspect the Minister will be coming out reiterating lines that he was given from the Prime Minister before this debate. And just look at the social credit system in China. Facial recognition linked to ID penalises people. Blacklisted citizens cannot buy train or plane tickets, book hotels or apply for certain jobs. This government has already indicated that migration, work and renting will be tied to ID. But how long will it be before future governments push further and accessing state services is brought under the control and monitoring of digital ID? We are already seeing signs of this framework within the School and Children's Wellbeing Bill, the Online Safety Act and the One Login system. Combined with a formal digital ID, these frameworks would create a world of control for Whitehall and a soulless dystopia for the rest of us. Together, they replace the honesty of decency of human-to-human interaction with opaque, mechanical, computer-says-no future. The scary truth is that the appeal of control and ID cards lies within anyone who has access to power, and it takes conscious effort in every one of us to resist this temptation. Power does corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, and I will give way.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Gentleman for giving way. Wouldn't he agree that if bad employers are not prevented from taking people on with national insurance numbers, or if they don't have their passports, they're not going to stop at taking someone on without digital ID?
Again, I agree with the Honourable Member in the points that he is making. The attitude of control strikes at the very heart of our political traditions. We are a representative democracy, not a command and control state. Government exists by the will of the people, not the other way round. Put simply, we are not a papers-please society. One of the most terrifying elements of the government's proposals are that these IDs are to be digital. The national database that our identities are to be held on is a true honeypot for hackers all over the world. And to those that say it would be secure, I say to you, name me a company, a government body that hasn't had a hacking crisis in recent years. The NHS, the Co-op, Jaguar Land Rover, I could go on. Even Estonia's government lost 280,000 digital ID photos in 2021. And I will give way.
Thank him for giving way. Does he share my concerns that this scheme could put constituents' most sensitive data into the hands of private, perhaps overseas individuals who may have neither our constituents nor our country's interests at heart?
Again, and I completely agree with the Honourable Member. Indeed, as the case of One Login, a cybersecurity specialist, who were able to infiltrate and potentially alter the underlying code without being noticed by the team that they were working on the project. In fact, the existing system could be compromised as we speak. We are assured by advocates of digital ID that clever technology will protect the data. But as I've outlined already, there is temptation to further integrate data within the system will be extremely strong. So therefore, how will it be that someone suggests security features are removed to make a system more efficient? Digital data brings me back to consent. And on this point, I would like to finish, Sir Edward. Digital ID is an ever more intrusive evolution of traditional ID cards, one that promises to be more oppressive. Coupled with the powers of digital databases, increasing widespread facial recognition, digitalised public services, and looming prospect of a central bank digital currencies, digital ID threatens to create an all-encompassing digital surveillance state that even George Orwell's 1984 could not predict. In every aspect of public life, we give over our data with consent. Yet digital ID turns that notion on its head, insisting that we hand over data to simply function in society and potentially for reasons we cannot consent to in advance. Final intervention, yeah.
One of my friends making a fantastic speech, but does he agree with me that this is just the latest example of this Labour government trying to push through something that was not in their manifesto, and therefore this House must do all it can to stop it from being a reality?
Again, I absolutely agree with my honourable friend, and therefore who else other than the Prime Minister is really wanting to drive this through? I doubt if the government expand the scope of digital ID after their initial implementation that they will be kind enough to offer an opt-out clause to anyone who has signed up. People up and down the country, 3 million who have signed today's petition, can see that this scheme is a disaster waiting to happen. I will give way to the Chair of the Petitions Committee, and then that will be...
As the Chair of the Petitions Committee, I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for making an excellent speech. 3 million signatures. I want to apologise to everyone here for there not being enough space in here for the number of members who have turned up. I thank them for turning up. I think it poses a question for the House we must settle in the future.
And I couldn't agree more with that point. It just shows the strength of feeling on this issue. There are thousands deeply offended by the intrusion on their civil liberties, thousands sceptical that Whitehall will be able to pull off such a complex scheme, and thousands who are digitally excluded, terrified of computer says no future. So the government should give up now, because those on this side of the debate will never give up. Whether today's identity cards are stopped before they are implemented, the last few months, as they were in the last few months of 2010, or over a decade ago, as they were in 1939, the British people will fight them. We will stop them, and we will overturn them. Sir Edward, as I said to the government on the day that they announced this policy, I am not a tin of beans, and I do not need a barcode. Yeah.